echo of his blood. Chapter 1. Form without a face. They say wet clay smells like a deep well or stagnant water, but to me, it always reminds me of Da Hong Pao. I adore that dry, almost foul smell, and the feeling of chalk crumbs on my lips. I guess I'm a little drug addict, but in our profession, they call it a sense of the material. A male bust stood frozen on the podium before me. No eyes, no lips, only the hard cut of a chin and overhanging brow ridges. The most frightening thing is not a person who is finished, but one who is just beginning. He doesn't yet have a soul, but he already has a form. I ran my fingertip from his temple to his earlobe. The clay was wet and sticky. I wanted to smooth out that bold line, make him smile, but my fingers wouldn't obey. His face was too serious, too heavy. I don't like men like that. I've always preferred soft ones, yielding ones. They're easier to manipulate. Damn, I breathed out. My voice clanged too loudly against the bare walls of the workshop. The glass slipped from my wet fingers and fell to the floor. My vision suddenly went dark, as if a thick, dusty blanket had been thrown over my head. I swayed, blindly grasping the edge of the wooden table. A cloud of dry clay dust rose from under my palm. Fatigue, just fatigue. I turned my head. There, on the edge of the porcelain sink, between the jars of paint thinner and the dried-out brushes, lay a white cardboard box, open, and a narrow plastic rectangle next to it. 2 clear ruby stripes, classic, like in all hopeless stories that end badly. I slowly pressed my palm to my stomach, through the thin, faded t-shirt. The skin felt hot, almost scalding. Inside, silence, no pulse, no movement. But the sticky feeling of impending disaster had already tightened in my throat. 40 days, exactly 40 days, had passed since I stood in the cemetery and watched the all-encompassing tragedy of the Anderson family. I remember every detail. Ruby Anderson, in dark glasses, pressing her lips together to keep from crying silently before her youngest son's grave, and Mark, the older brother, a man with a heart the color of wet granite. He stood there looking as if he were attending a drawn-out board meeting, not his own brother's funeral, and me, standing slightly to the side. Mark and I had known each other for a long time, not exactly in love. But that night, right before the tragedy, was peculiar. I'd rate it a solid 7 out of 10. Why am I even thinking about it now? With plasticine dough in hand, I don't know. There's always been some flaw in my mind. That evening, Mark came to my workshop himself. He smelled of expensive leather, expensive alcohol, and a wild animal hunger. He barely said anything. He simply pressed me against the heavy door, and his kiss was so full of desperate, angry longing that I decided to break the cardinal rule: never let anyone with money get close. And 3 days later, David arrived, the younger brother. He stumbled in, drunk, broken. Tears streaked across his cheeks. He fell onto this very sofa and screamed that Mark had always hated him, that his family considered him worthless. I gave him water. I tried to lift him, but he grabbed my wrists. It wasn't love. It was a drowning man's desperate attempt to grab hold of the first piece of debris that came his way. I was drunk. I felt sorry for him, and also, I liked watching this perfect dynasty crumble. I didn't push him away, and 12 hours later, David's car crashed into a concrete bridge support at 160 kilometers per hour. No, I whispered into the darkness of my closed eyes. No, no. I opened my eyes and stared at the calendar pinned to the wall with a crooked nail. The numbers didn't add up. Or, on the contrary, did they add up too perfectly? If we count from the night with Mark, the deadline is approaching. But if that night with David, it's Mark, I said out loud. Go voice dropped to a whisper. According to the deadline, it has to be Mark. David, it's just a coincidence. It means nothing. I went to the sink, picked up the plastic test, and squeezed it so hard in my fist that the sharp edges dug into my skin. Tomorrow, I'll go to the Anderson mansion. I'll tell Mark. He's tough, he's cold, but he's honest. He won't abandon me. He won't abandon his child. I looked up at the clay bust. The light outside had completely faded, and in the twilight, an unsculpted, blind face stared straight at me. Clay bears fingerprints, but a woman holds within herself something best left unseen. I threw a wet, heavy cloth over the sculpture. But why? When I said Mark's name, did a glimmer of hope arise in the pit of my stomach, instead of an icy, paralyzing fear?